Work at height is... Work at height is a really common hazard, so it's very common to see it on NEBOSH NG2 projects, or if you're an international student, the IG2 project. So let's get right into it. The first place I always like to start is with the hazard categories, which we have here. So we are here. This is the hazard category, working at height. So that's what we're going to use on our risk assessment. So we're going to type working at height. Now it's well worth just pausing for a moment and remembering just how broad a topic this is. Let's just take a quick look at the syllabus to see what's in there. So we have all of the fall stuff. So things like fragile roofs, prevention of falls, but it's not just falling from things, it's also falling materials. And we've also got all of the different types of equipment, like step ladders and scaffolds and mutes, trestles, platforms, and again, falling materials through stacking and storage. So what we can kind of go at here is you can work at height in some kind of place, like a roof or the top of a building or a platform of some kind, or you could be using some kind of equipment like a ladder or a scaffold or a cherry picker, mute, or this could be a falling object problem where things are falling from storage, stacks, racking, and other types of storage. So we've got different types of hazards to use if we want to. Now there's a mistake which I've often seen. I've seen examiners pick people up for things like this. Falling objects are not a hazard. Falls are not a hazard. Falling objects, that's an incident. The object is the hazard. The object at height is the hazard. When it falls, that's an incident. Like you would report it, wouldn't you? Because things shouldn't be falling. Falling objects, these should be mentioned in the who might be harmed and how column. We don't want to see falls or falling objects in the hazard description because they're not hazards. So what could be a hazard? Well, it could be delivery drivers must work on top of vehicles to close curtains, approx 5 meters high. That would be an adequate description of a work at height hazard. I'm describing the situation, I'm describing where they are, why they're at height, what is the work at height place, and I've given an indication of the height. Shall we do another one? Warehouse operatives must use aircraft steps up to 4 meters high to access racking shelves, okay? Again, I've mentioned what the equipment is. I've given an idea as to what the work at height task is, and I've also mentioned the height. Shall we do a falling object one? Use of hand tools on scaffolding approximately 10 meters high. There we are. The hand tool is at height on the scaffolding. That will then link us to the potential for falling objects. So why don't we do a who might be harmed and how for that one? We'll say people under the scaffolding, such as construction workers and visitors, could be hit by a dropped object. This could cause a fatality or serious brain injury, such as a skull fracture. There we are. We've got a who, we've got an incident, which is the dropped falling object, and then we've got quite a specific type of injury there. That should do. Now, when we fill in the next two columns, column 3 and column 4, we have to do 3 things. We have to bring this hazard into legal compliance. So we have to introduce any legally required measures. The NEBOSH examiner also needs you to show your understanding of the hierarchy of controls. So they want you, wherever possible, to try to eliminate the needs to work at height. Can you engineer things out? So can you have guardrails? And then you have all the various administrative procedures and PPE possibly, depending on the situation. Thirdly, you also just generally have to reduce the risk to as low a level as you reasonably can. So you have to introduce every control which is reasonably practicable. You are going to have quite a lot of controls. Now, in terms of the legislation that you can refer to, which is useful for your controls, but it's also useful for your specific legal arguments here, well, the go-to legislation for National General Certificate students, the NEBOSH NC, it's going to be the Work at Height Regulations 2005. This is the go-to one, the main one. And here we've got a variety of different duties. Now, one of the main ones you are going to go to might be the avoidance of risks from work at height. So here, this is where it will talk about avoiding work at height or taking measures to prevent a person from falling. So that's probably the go-to one, but it depends, your specific legal argument here is in relation to an action. So your actions, it might be in relation to training or something else. So don't just leap for the obvious duty. You could choose another type of duty depending on what the action is. So for example, if you're recommending regular inspections of the equipment, well, you could use that duty there for inspections of the equipment. If your action is in relation to falling objects, then you've got another duty there in relation to falling objects, and so on. So use a duty which is specific to the action you are recommending. More advanced students will know that there is a little bit of a duty for this in the workplace health, safety and welfare regulations, which I've previously said is a complete jumbled mess. And if you scroll down a bit, you'll see falls or falling objects. It's a little bit older than the work at height regs, but it does talk about falling into tanks, pits and structures and basically covering things up. So you could use one of those if you wanted to. Now, international students, wakey wakey, if you're an IGC student, NEBOSH IGC students, what have you got? Well, there's a whole range of different things depending on what's going on. One of the things you could use is the Safety and Health in the Use of Machinery Code of Practice. So let's take a look at it. This is mostly in relation to machinery guarding and things like that, but there is the odd little mention of falling objects and also of falls. So that is a bit of a mention of falling or ejected objects. If we scroll further down, we've got this bit here, risk of slipping, tripping or falling. That's page 75. So let's just do a quick search for 75 and bang, there we are. Go up a little bit. Well, 3 duties, not a great deal, but if you are working on a machine, it does talk about how you've got to design it, construct it to prevent people from falling off. It talks about handholds, talks about full PPE for maintenance. That could be useful depending on what your action is. If you work in the construction industry, there's a lot of fall stuff in here. If we just type in fall, this is C167. You've got work at heights, including roof work. It talks about guarding the edge so that people can't fall off of it. It also talks about the fragile roofs, fragile materials. Here we've got R175, which is the recommendation for C167. This is so geeky, isn't it? So geeky. So there again, we've got scaffolds, we've got all kinds of falling related stuff, more stuff there, and so on. And then finally, we've got a code of practice. Same thing really, just can you see how there's more and more detail? Convention, recommendation, code of practice. It just gets more and more detailed. Loads of work at height related stuff in there and loads of falling objects things in there. I'll end with one last thing, one key mistake to avoid on this. Just remember that falling objects is not a hazard category. It's not a hazard category. Falling objects, I've seen people write that down. It's not a hazard category. If we go to the list of NEBOSH hazard categories, there is no falling objects in there. It's all part of working at height. So let's remove that mess and make it work at height again. Hope you found that super useful. And if you've got any questions, hit me up, get in touch, and see you in the next one.